Hello and welcome everyone to episode 114 of DoubleDM podcast. I am, as always, your host Emil, and I am here with my co-host Niels.
Hi there.
For we are today here to discuss challenging your players in interesting and new ways instead of using just combat or just a social encounter. Challenge your players on a new level. That is what we're here to talk about today, especially in designing challenges and unique new challenges for your players. But first, as is every week's tradition, we are here to discuss our weeks, to share with you a little glimpse into our lives and what happened for us. So Niels, how are you doing?
Well, that's a loaded question, but overall I would say good but stressed. That would be the conclusion of this week.
And he calls it a loaded question. I'm asking if he's good and he says loaded question. Like I just asked like I don't know, I just asked his political stance on like I don't know, whatever the fuck. And he's like loaded question. No.
It has layers, okay? Overall stressed because of university stuff, a lot of shit to do. Meanwhile working and still enjoyable week so far.
Okay.
So yeah, part of that was were two amazing sessions that I had, or we had.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
We had?
Yeah, the one on Sunday.
Oh, you count Sunday to this week. Okay.
Yeah, from last recording to today.
I mean, last recording.
Yeah, okay. Potato, man.
After that session, my friend. We had a session on Sunday and had a lot of fun. That's true.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I felt it went great.
Mm-hmm.
I only can hope that you think the same. So
I think it got into the thick of it, into the meaty juice around this session at the end, especially the later stages of that session. The fourth episode of our second actual play, to be exactly precise, is where it's gonna be at. I think it's been probably the best thing we ever recorded, this actual play wise. So that's great.
Thanks. That means a lot to me. And then another insanely amazing session that I've been waiting for was the session 0/session 1 for our new Curse of Strahd campaign.
Indeed.
It just, we just got thrown into cold water, basically. I was not prepared for the character connection questions.
I was not prepared for basically anything along those lines. I thought this was supposed to be like, okay, let's make those connections now in play for the next 2 hours, and then next time we start with an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to get into a discussion about TTRPG topics, because maybe this could be an entire episode. But I don't know if these character connection questions are good.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is not a criticism on the GM's part. It's a good way to get connection going between the characters. But I also feel like that at the same time, when you get these connections going, you're kind of throwing your players, as Neil said, into cold water, which can mean a lot of different things. It's good and bad at the same time. It's nuanced as a whole topic.
So it just is.
Yeah, it just is. I think it was good so we can establish connections quickly and get to the fun of role-playing as a group quickly, which is what we wanted for this campaign. So yeah, for this campaign, it was the right decision. But generally, I wouldn't do it personally.
Yeah, it's highly situational.
It's highly situational for these kind of campaigns. And for this campaign, it works out. But for another campaign that I can already see in my head forming that I want to play at some point as every week, that wouldn't work. Having these character connections from the start, because why are these connections there? The question of why has to be answered by they were needed for the game to start. And I think that reason isn't that good. I'm not saying that it's bad to have connections before actually playing the game. I just feel like that making those connections in the first session is also great. But at the same time, then you have the flip side of how do I bring the group together? This is the flip side question. There's two sides of the same coin, and you have to just decide for one side. And if you decide for one side, just try to make that side the better side.
One thing that's a bit not weird, but something that you have to think about is that it can subtract from the player agency in some ways, because during those questions I was a bit hesitant to answer just because I don't want to put anything or force any other player into the things that I just said without them being okay with it. And I think...
Yeah. So further on, what else happened in your week that you want to talk about?
Yeah, just at work, we are terribly understaffed as per usual. I think we have 6 or 7 people called in sick this week. So that's a shit ton, to put it lightly. But other than that, I'm just hyped for the next Curse of Strahd session.
Same here.
That's basically it for my week. I don't want to bore you with any university protocol writing. How about yours?
My week has been tiring. Not stressful, but tiring. First of all, Monday was a holiday, so that was good.
Agreed.
Tuesday was my last day of freedom, if you want to say it like that. That sounds awfully mean, because on Wednesday I started my job, my new employment, you could say. Been introduced to the team I'm gonna be working with. I've been introduced to the office where I will be working if I don't work from home, which will be probably most of the time. So it's pretty chill. But also, when you go into the office with an appointment that says expect to be there for like 2 hours and then stay for 5 to 6. Not because I was forced to stay there, just because I had so much stuff to do there, right? Meet everyone in the team, talk to everyone a little bit, get to know them. Let them get to know you. You will be working with them. You should know them before you actually work with them. Get set up with everything you have. I mean, this company is great. I'm going to be very honest. On paper, this company looks great and the atmosphere is amazing.
That's always a good sign.
They value professionalism. They value speed and efficient working, but they're also very laid back. They're chill. They're friendly. Which for some people that can obviously be a red flag, and I won't lie, but personally for me, this didn't seem like the, oh yeah, we are all a family and you don't let family hanging type of company, but more of a, we are working here, we are at a job, but also please don't think of me as your all-time boss, and if I say something, you have to do it. If you have some ideas, bring them in, please, because at least for your expertise, I am not the expert here. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, a more modern approach.
A more modern approach, a more flat hierarchy approach. First day at the job yesterday on Wednesday. After that, I had to go to Kendo as every week on Wednesday, 3-hour session as every Wednesday most of the time. But the weather in Germany is very sunny and hot this week, which is a good thing, except if you're doing sports. Especially if your body and your mind hasn't adjusted to, oh, it's hot, I should eat and probably drink more because I'm burning way more energy just by existing.
Yep.
At least more water, right? And at the training, every one of us realized, oh fuck, none of us drank enough. Let's take it slow for today. But it was still a very tiring exercise. But normally, for example, in the winter stages of Kendo, I have a 1 liter bottle of water with me for training. In the winter stages, I don't really touch it. I drink from it a bit, but honestly, when it's winter time and we're training, because I feel so bloated afterwards, even after just a few sips. But now in the summer, I had to gulp this whole thing down while training to even continue training. So it's an adjusting phase right now, springtime, especially because this is really the first hot week we have.
Yeah, especially because it's the first time in the year that it's a longer period of warmth.
Yeah.
Rather than just being hot, cold. That can be a bitch too, not gonna lie.
Like Monday was a good day, Tuesday was good, Wednesday was good, today is good, and tomorrow is supposed to be good as well. So 5 days at least of very good weather. I don't know, Saturday I think it's supposed to be a little bit less, but doesn't matter. Funny thing, there was another student worker that was on board with me. Very lovely person. And she is supposed to be doing the social media channels for the company because they don't have any yet. Or well, they have, but they aren't using them correctly. And they want someone that has experience. Then they were like, okay, because she was so instantly integrated into the whole company because they wanted to do this with her very quickly. While my team is a bunch of IT dudes, they were like, we will wait till Monday till we get you on the team, actually. Enjoy your last week of no work at all. The marketing team with her was thinking about some way to introduce her to everyone in the company of the 200-300 people that work for the company or something in a fun way to get some chatter going in the small talk and office chats that we have on Microsoft Teams. And then they were like, we want something where the IT dudes don't instantly flag up and know what's up. And then all these 4 people that were in the room discussing this looked at me because I was in the room doing my setting up my office, setting up my PC, and they were like, can you help us? And I'm like, sure. And then I gave them a name that is basically an error message that doesn't exist, but looks like a very legit error message to everyone that has ever seen an error message, right? And then said, just take that name, delete the email from the Microsoft Teams account, basically anonymize her, make that the name, and let her just chatter with that name in the channel and stuff like that. And then today they added that name. And instantly, like 5 minutes later, someone was like, oh, fuck, do we need to call IT? Oh, fuck, do we need to call the boss? So second day at work, and I already caused a lot of chaos.
Just, you haven't even started, but started already and already pulled a prank. Perfect.
They asked me to help. I said, sure, I will help.
Amazing.
And I did help. And I made something that to the ITlers, because all of those the IT people in the company, they said that error message looks wrong. It doesn't exist. That's gotta be some kind of prank or something. But the normal people said, this is bad. Is this an error? We need to fix this, right? So it worked exactly how they intended. A short minute of shock, generating a little bit of chatter, and then everyone carries on with their day without actually interrupting their work.
Perfect. Just keeping the spirits up with a lighthearted joke. Perfect.
Yeah, lighthearted joke to generate chatter, just like you would do on social media, to get the social media manager that we have now on board introduced tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect.
On Friday. Do you know, as a completely remote company, or a nearly completely remote company with some of our people living in other parts of Germany or Spain, obviously as a company, they have these after work activities. Like, for example, the Berlin office goes to laser tag, I think once a month or something. Or at least that's what they told us, that they might go to laser tag. Do you know what they do digitally?
Let me hear it.
They play Gartic Phone.
Oh my God. I would instantly enroll for the online activity. I mean, don't get me wrong, laser tag can be fun, but have you played Gartic Phone though? This shit is funny as hell.
The problem is that playing Gartic Phone with my friends and playing Gartic Phone with my boss would be two very distinct activities.
That would be oh God, yeah.
Anyways, we're running a little bit long for the recap of this episode already. So please, let's jump into our episode 114 and how to creatively challenge your players. Hey listener, how are you enjoying the show so far? Tell us about it in whatever way you see fit. Go to our social media pages and add us or DM us about your favorite episode of the show. We would love to hear from you on what impact our show might have had on your home games. Or you could review us on your podcast app of choice and leave us a nice message with a 5-star review. And if you want to go above and beyond, bring a friend into the fold. Tell them about our show and refer us to them so they can get a piece of the pie as well. Thank you for listening to DoubleDM and joining us on this incredible journey. So Niels, I have a question for today's episode. Oh, well, it's not necessarily a question. It's been on my mind a bit because we as GMs have to do a lot of work in quotation marks at the table. I'm going to say it like this. This is not necessarily what I'm going to call it work, but a lot of other people might not see it as work. It's not necessarily strictly defined as work that you have to do, but a GM is supposed to be attentive. They're supposed to be reactive. They're supposed to be active, and they're supposed to be part of every conversation that is happening at the table, listening in, always on top of their game, pulling with every punch and stuff like that, right? This is a lot of stuff, but it's in practice, it's not necessarily that hard. It's not hard work. It's not what many people assign the word work with, but there's a lot of stuff to do as a GM. You can do a lot of stuff. Sometimes there are more moments where you don't have to do anything or where you don't need to do anything, but generally you always have something to do. You can always do something. You can always be part of the session. You can always be engaged. You can always be in the moment. And the thing is that when thinking about right? When I prep my games, the first question I ask myself is, when every session, when I prep, is, okay, how will this be engaged by the players? I want my players to engage. It doesn't matter what I have. It can be a city, it can be an NPC, it can be a combat, it can be anything. I want my players to, at the table, be in the moment and be able to do something.
Yeah.
And when I create something, when I prep something, I always think about, okay, how can my players interact with this at first? How can I make sure that they have points of interest? How can I make sure that they have stuff to do? Sometimes this is very easy to do or very surface level to do. I have a city. What points of interest are there? What NPCs are in the city so my players can interact? But that's not all I think about. It's also how challenging should this, whatever I am doing, this amorphous blob of stuff that I want to do in this session, should this be for my players? How hard do I want this stuff to be? And that's what I want to talk about today. So my question is, just right off the gate, I don't want to hear you say, this is complicated, there's nuance. I want to give your simple answer. How challenging should a TTRPG be?
As challenging as it needs to be.
Fuck you.
No,
I know this question cannot be answered. I just want you to define your personal, this is what I like as a player and as a GM.
What I like as a player or as a GM, both basically, is when I have to think a bit about stuff and the answer isn't necessarily right in front of me.
Yeah.
But still not, in quotation marks, waste a whole session on this one problem.
Okay. Yeah.
If that's defined enough for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You said exactly what I think that most people would answer. Obviously, there are different levels of people that mean that, but generally what you said is basically what I expect most people to answer. I want something that challenges me, but not in a way that I am unable to beat it, but in a way that I have engagement. Because as we said in our danger episode a few episodes back, it's about being engaged at the table.
Exactly.
And danger gives stakes to that engagement. And now we're talking about there should be engagement. And there can only be engagement if you as a player have to make a choice, have to think about what you're doing, have to engage with something. It's not just there aren't any challenges whatsoever. You get everything that you want without ever rolling a dice, without ever trying to convince someone, because everything is handed to you on a silver platter. You want there to be a challenge because that just means you get to play.
Exactly. It's just sometimes, obviously, it depends on how well suited you and your character are for a certain challenge that is placed before you, how challenging it feels to you. And of course, there are sessions where you feel more challenged than others at the table, and the other way around. It's just the normal way of the game, basically. But if there is a balance between everything going on in the campaign as a whole, if everyone felt challenged in the same ways or to the same amount, not in the same ways, I think that's a good balance to strike. For example, some players might struggle or might like the challenge of combat and think of how they can interact with each part of this moving combat in a specific way or in a fun way or in an interactive way, while others just want to hit things, for example. And the other time, it's a math puzzle that you like as a player, but the others might not be that enjoyed by. And if you find a good balance between the difference or the different challenges that you can put there as a GM to engage everyone to roughly the same degree, I think then you hit the sweet spot. But then the question is, how do I figure out what challenges my players like, challenges my players don't like, and what is hard for them, what is not?
And I mean, this is an aspect that is, in my opinion, right? We talked about session 0 a lot, and we talk about them being important for safety tools, important for expectation management. I don't know, the schedule of the campaign, right? But to create characters. But there's a lot more you can do in a session 0. You can, right, in expectation management, you don't just have to talk about the ambiguous goals of your game and what is allowed and what isn't allowed at the table. But you can also talk about, right, do you like combat? Do you like social encounters? Do you like this, that, this, and this, right? You can ask very specific questions about this, about playstyle, because everyone has a unique playstyle. But you can try to figure out in session 0 the playstyle, especially of newer players. Maybe they don't even know their own playstyle. Maybe they haven't defined it at all, even if they've been playing for 2 to 3 years, but they've been only playing with one group. And that group had that specific playstyle, and the player doesn't even know that there are different types of play. That can happen. And in a session 0 or in the beginning of a campaign, you can feel each other out on where do we stand on specific types of challenges. One very simple thing, right, is when I create a campaign, I sometimes ask, do you guys like puzzles, when I don't know the players? Because puzzles, in my opinion, is a very divisive topic in the TTRPG space. Some people love them, some people hate them. I see valid reasons for both sides. I am on the side of I like them, not I love them, but I enjoy a different type of challenge. And that's why I like puzzles. I wouldn't enjoy a game that is basically only puzzles instead of combat, for example. But I would enjoy a game that is in a dungeon to open the big door to the ancient treasure room of this archmage. You have to be clever and solve this riddle. I am okay with that. I like that. It's a different type of challenge. It's not a combat. It's not a skill challenge. It's something new and different. And I like puzzles for exactly that reason. They give the GM another tool set to use to challenge players and player characters. And on the other side, people are like, yeah, it only challenges the player characters and only the players, because solving a riddle is only done in your head and just cannot do what is in your character's head. You're the one thinking. So you're solving the riddle, not your character. There are ways to work with that, but still, I see both sides of the argument. But I just enjoy them because they're a different type of challenge.
Yeah, but I think you touch on a interesting topic there the differentiation between challenging the player and challenging the player character itself. I think this is a distinction that you have to make or should make when we are discussing this, because when you want to challenge the player character, that's just your job as a GM, basically, or one part of your job.
Yeah, it's part of what you do.
Because you play the adversaries of those player characters. You play the allies of those player characters. You play the world around them. So you naturally have to play the challenges set in front of them. But then the next part is the challenge to the player itself. How much of it should there be and how much shouldn't there be is one question that I usually struggle with. It's
an interesting question, because I think that a lot of people would answer instantly with, you shouldn't challenge the player at all. They're not part of the game. And I see where this is coming from. This is a lot of akin to the metagaming discussion, right? Players are not the player characters. They shouldn't be the one challenged. The character should be the one challenged. You're playing a character. And that is true. But personally, I think you're challenging the players all the time when you challenge a player character. Because on the most obvious way, they're playing that player character. You're challenging them to play out a character that is faced with this challenge, to play out their character that is faced with this challenge. They need to solve the challenge of finding out what their character would do. And also you're challenging them, for example, in a combat. I assume at this point, but I think that I'm pretty sure on this one. Everyone that is listening, everyone in the TTRPG space that has played for at least quite some time probably has made tactical decisions that are not based on the character, what they would do, but on what the player thinks is best in this instance. And before anyone gets mad at me that that's bad, it isn't. You didn't do anything wrong. You played a game.
Exactly.
And you played the game to win this specific encounter. There's nothing bad about it. You did everything you wanted to do. You had fun. Why does it matter so much? But that's the thing. In a combat, you're also challenged. You're also being challenged by your game master or by the game to find the best possible outcome for your character, while also obviously including what would my character do. Maybe they would take a suboptimal choice. But what does that suboptimal choice mean for me? That's also, you're always challenged as a player to do the playing.
Another thing, that as a player, you are part of the game itself as well. This can be a bit convoluted at times because you are playing a story in a game as completely different persons.
Yeah.
And you all come together, sit at a table or sit in a Discord or wherever, right? And play imaginary characters living a imaginary story. And these characters are the story, that what you're playing out is the story itself. But you as the players and the GM are still part of the game, because without you, the game wouldn't exist. So I think thinking about how to challenge the players that are part of the game, that want to enjoy the game, and then therefore thinking how to challenge them can also be beneficial to the game and to the story itself.
Yeah. And again, players have different playstyles. Go find them in session 0. For example, one thing that I think is very great is the playstyle leveling section of the Cyberpunk Red role-playing book. There's basically this mini game or mini exercise that you can do, is send your players a lot of quotes, a lot of statements that categorize into 4 different categories. And your players are supposed to choose a number of them. And they choose And then they have chosen X amount from this specific category, X amount from this specific category, and so on and so forth. And that way you can find out, okay, the fun of playing TTRPGs for this player comes from having interesting combats. The fun of this player comes from role-playing. We can discuss that obviously role-playing is also combat and combat is also role-playing, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to talk about it. Generally, it's just find the playstyle of your players. Find out what they enjoy. Ask them what they enjoy. Make up scenarios with them. Just basic scenarios in session 0 that showcase what they would like to do. Like, can be if you just ask them, okay, you're standing in front of a locked door. What would be your first response as a player? Not as a character, but as a player. And not you as a player are standing in front of it. You're having one character. You don't know anything about this character. I want you to know what your general reaction would be most of the time when you're playing. Because if a player says, I want to bash in the door, that gives you some kind of statement about that probably enjoy a little more of the straightforward approach. And that can help you to know, okay, this player is straightforward. They don't make many plans. They probably are a little bit more on the combat heavy side or whatever, right? But when you find out what the play style is, it gives you opportunities to find out how to challenge your players. And one thing, it's good when your group has different play styles, in my opinion, because if all of the group would like combat solely, then you would only have to do combat challenges. But it's good if a group has different play styles. Obviously, there are certain playstyles that are just incompatible with each other, and we all have to accept that. Not everyone can play with everyone. Not every table is fit for every player, and you have to deal with that. But generally, if you have different people playing together and that can play together, you're gonna get a way better experience because these people are gonna add to each other. They're gonna play together. They're not gonna be trying to one-up each other because they all want to play the same type of style, but they have different styles that work together, that they can face every challenge you can think of for them.
Yeah, and one thing regarding that is if you have a newer player that doesn't really know what playstyle they want to play or like playing, this is especially amazing because then you branch out into multiple different playstyles and then everyone at the table can see what works for them best, even if it's something that they haven't thought about before, in my opinion. Or with time, you as a person change naturally. So maybe your playstyle changes.
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, and through basically just experimentation, through the different challenges that you face during play, you can rediscover yourself and your own playstyle through that. Just because, I was once a player that only liked, or not only, but mostly liked combat. But nowadays, combat feels kind of dull, or can feel dull. But this just sitting in a tavern and talking to the other players and some NPCs. And then you can switch and change and adapt and just make a whole new playstyle out of your past experiences and the things that those experiences led to.
And for players, I'm gonna say it like this. Find your playstyle. Try to define it for yourself. It doesn't have to be that you define it for a GM or for other players or for other people. Define it for yourself. What do you like? What do you don't like? Why do you like it? Why do you don't like? Find the answers to this and make them up for you. Write them down. Because when you create a character, you have a simple choice. Obviously, the choice is way more nuanced than this, but I'm gonna make it simple for the episode for presentation purposes. Either you play into your playstyle. Let's say you're a very heavy role player that doesn't like combat. Combat is dull for you. That is very basic. The real world is way more complex. That is your style. Now you have basically two choices. Do I play into my style and play a character that is heavy on role play and very little on combat? Or do I challenge my own playstyle? I'm creating a character that is fit for combat, that is made for combat and not necessarily good for roleplay to challenge myself. That is also something you can do. And it's okay. But if you know your playstyle, you can make that choice. When you don't know your playstyle, it's not going to be easy to make that choice.
And I think both choices that you just mentioned have different pros and cons. If you make a character that is heavily made for roleplay and like the roleplay aspect but don't like the combat aspect and play into that, you become a god in that regard and therefore elevate that aspect of the game in those situations where you can shine. But if you go the other way around and you're an amazing role player but not fit for combat, but build a character that is only fit for combat, you can level out the playing field in that regard, you could say. Okay, yeah. I feel like it's not necessarily much about pros and cons
here.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly just, what do you want to do with the character that you're currently creating, right?
Exactly.
Do you want to challenge yourself? Do you want to play comfort? That's basically the choice, I think. Do you want to play your comfort, or do you want to take on a new thing? And right, obviously we all know that there's a lot more factors involved, but for presentation purposes, just bear with the example. Don't try to take it apart, because it's very easy. I would do it 5 minutes after the recording anyway, so I have already done it. Don't worry. But okay, I want to talk about something different. First of all, let's get back to GMing. We talked about players a bit. Let's get back to GMs. You want to challenge your players. You want them to have a good time, and a good time comes in TTRPGs often from overcoming challenges. But at the same time, you also, in my opinion, should be an enabler.
Yeah.
You don't want your players to always be challenged to face every single thing, that every single thing is a potential point of failure. You don't want that, at least not for me. And it's very much this discussion between being an adverse GM, an adversarial GM, versus being something else that I don't know the term for. A compassionate GM, even though that, I think, alone the terms already kind of put a bad, negative vibe to adversarial GM.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this a few times. When there is, in TTRPGs, oftentimes when there is a or B, one or the other, basically this scale of how much of this are you X and how much are you Y in the TTRPG space, it's often good to have a balance between the two. Not a perfect level 50-50 balance, but generally you're never one thing only. You're never only a prep GM. You also improv. You're never only an improv GM. You're also somewhat a prep GM. Obviously it can be 90-10, but it's never 100-0. Because I think that is not good.
Yeah.
Because you completely rid yourself of a complete tool set for you to use that you can create value with that you weren't able to create otherwise. And the same goes for being an adversarial GM. I hate the word adversarial GM because oftentimes it's thrown around by people about GMs that don't just allow the weird shenanigans to happen, that sometimes stomp their foot on the ground and say, no, this doesn't work. A good GM knows when to say no. That is true. That statement is true. At the same time, a great GM knows even when they could say no, saying yes is just more fun. A great GM doesn't just know when to say no, they know how to evaluate every single situation and find the right answer for the table. That is a great GM. That is what we should talk about. But that's obviously way too long for a Twitter post. No one would engage with that. And we all want the engagement on the internet, right?
Yeah,
Niels, I want to ask you again. I just want you to answer. I don't want you to dance around the question. How much of an adversarial GM are you?
In percentages, I would say roughly 60%.
And the other 40% are what?
Allowing and enabling all the weird shit.
Okay. So you would, by that standard, be okay if someone labeled you as an adversarial GM?
I wouldn't, because I think everything in TTRPGs should be and is nuanced in every things. Because I wouldn't describe myself as an adversarial GM itself, but I think especially the combination of setting challenges and saying no, and then still enabling weird shit to happen is one of the best things you can do, at least in my opinion. Because I think the one doesn't work without the other.
Oh yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
They go hand in hand. They are not necessarily the same because they're opposites, but they move in parallel lines. Without someone saying, no, this isn't possible, you cannot enable something because everything is on the table all the time. It doesn't feel special if something happens that wasn't possible before. Or on the other hand, if you always just block off things, it just feels crappy.
And I feel like that's exactly it. The label adversarial GM just feels negative.
Yeah.
Not just because of the vibes that has been attached to it, but just because it means that you as a GM are kind of against your players and you're not.
Exactly. I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Even though I say no to my players doesn't mean I'm against my players. It enables that basically by me saying no, it enables them to think of options or basically placing an obstacle in front of their way. This is something I would categorize in the adversarial GM column.
Yeah, on a basis level, it's adversarial to challenge your players because you're working against them.
Exactly. But by placing that challenge, that in quotation marks roadblock in front of them, I enable them to think about stuff or the ways how they want to overcome this. how they want to go around this, under it, over it, whatever the fuck. I just give them a thing that they can overcome. And as you said before, overcoming things in TTRPGs is where the fun is.
Yeah, but the thing is, all right, there is actual adversarial GMing, which is being out to kill your players. Even there, in my opinion, there's nuance. Because what some people see as being out to kill your player characters, or the player characters of your players, to make the players lose or whatever, there's nuance. Because if the game we agreed upon is gonna be deadly and all my monsters will do the best they can to kill you, am I adversarial?
I don't think you are.
I would say no. This is, again, a playstyle question. If someone enjoys a very deadly game where no monster is gonna pull their punches, they're gonna kill you if they have the chance to. If you don't play safe, if you don't play calculated, you're gonna die. That is not adversarial GMing in itself. Adversarial GMing is telling your players, no, fuck you, that's why.
Yeah, and one thing regarding that is saying, yeah, no, the combat will be just normal, and then not disclosing how you want to, or what type of playstyle you are playing with monsters or whatever. That would be a problem.
That's a question I ask in my session zero sometimes. Once again, how deadly do you want my monsters to be? My biggest example for this is one of the episodes that we did. I don't know which one it is anymore, but that episode started because we were talking about that a trained combatant would know the difference between someone unconscious and someone dead, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because that is the prime example of this. If I say, how do you want my monsters to be very deadly? And then I explain it with this example. Do you want them to attack you while you're down? Because then you're surely gonna get killed if you're downed and no one does anything about it at the first second they get. And when my players say yes, I'm saying, okay, big monsters, and most people where it is reasonably to assume that they would know that you're still breathing to attack you. Because you're not dead yet, but they can make you dead. And that's what they want. See how easy that is? That is a 2-minute discussion. That is a GM proposing a scenario, asking a question, and the players answering. And then if there needs to be a little bit of discussion, but it defines exactly how I, as a GM, should enable and challenge my players. Because it tells me, okay, my players want these challenging, deadly combats. So I'm going to challenge them with deadly, engaging, bad combats. With maybe even unfair combats. Do they want unfair combats that force them to flee, run away, give up? That can be something that not a lot of people do in a game like D&D, where that's a power fantasy. Giving up or running away feels like losing. And it is. But if you overcome that power fantasy of I should be able to beat everything, my GM will only put things in front of me that I can beat, so I will try, then maybe you have a great game. Talking about this, how much of enabling and challenging and in what ways you should enable and challenge your players is a good thing to do. And again, this episode is about it. Think about this. But I want now to get to the enabling part. How do we enable our players? What does it even mean to enable players at a TTRPG table?
I think a big part of that is pulling with the punches that you receive. Because if a player comes up with a beautiful or weird or fucked up idea and you think, yeah, that might work, but probably won't, go ahead and let that play out. Just go with it is the best advice I can give for that right now. Because it's so fucking nuanced in every situation is different on how I can enable my players.
But I think it isn't that nuanced, actually, if I think about it. Because, again, as you said, it's pulling with the punches. If there is a chance that this thing that the player is proposing works, and you think to yourself, yeah, this is gonna be fun, let's just pull with it. That's all the nuance you need, right? In this moment, you have the chance to give your players a moment they will talk about for weeks after, even if it's completely dumb. But they're gonna enjoy it. And we're here for enjoyment.
I mean, the best kind of plans that I did as a player and received as a GM are those where I think to myself, well, if this works, it will be awesome. But if it fails, it will be hilarious.
I will say this the way it is. The best plans fail.
Yeah.
And this statement can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And I will say the one that I meant. When the players come up with the best plan imaginable for some situation, I often think that it's going to be the most boring plan because it's the most foolproof idea. It works perfectly. And the scheming planning phase of that plan is then the important part at the table. But right, if that plan is basically foolproof, perfect, doesn't require any dice rolls, whatever, the only thing that was interesting about the plan was the making of the plan. But a very fun plan that gives the players the engagement is the one where they have to act, where they have to do stuff, where there is a chance of failure, where there's a big chance of failure, where there is a lot of moments where fun stuff could happen, where there is a moment where they have to improvise because something goes wrong. And we all know that a heist movie, these heist movies, Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, all of these type of movies, they are fun, not because the plans are great, but because the plans are good, fun, and also go wrong at some point. And then the group tries to have to improvise. They have to work with the punches. The plan is important, but a plan is, at least for entertainment purposes, more fun if it not necessarily fails, but if there are moments where there's uncertainty, where there's danger, where there is a challenge that wasn't accounted for.
Yeah, and I think the uncertainty part is where it becomes a real nail biter. This is where it gets interesting, because everything can happen. Every card's on the table, and now we see the last card being drawn. And depending on that card, this is where it all goes down. And then there will be another situation like this, and another, and another, and another. Those are the fun ones. If something fucked up goes wrong, because that's something you didn't think about, these are the fun ones.
Yeah, and again, this is a disconnect between player characters that want the best plan possible to minimize failure, and the players that obviously want to have the engagement. And a perfect plan isn't really that engaging. But where should you be as a player, right? On this scale of player character wants the best plan imaginable, but I want to have some engagement. First of all, I'm gonna say it like this: there is never a perfect plan in TTRPGs. I've said this before, but there's always gonna be a little bit of dice rolls attached when I am the GM for that, because I just hate it when you make a plan for 2 hours and then the plan works as intended, which is what I want you to have. I want to enable you that the making of the plan works, but at the same time, the making of the plan was a challenge. One challenge. It was one challenge in itself. That isn't all I wanted to have in this session. I want you to have more challenges attached. I want you to have more ways of engaging with the game and world we are having here.
And I think this is exactly something that answers your question, how you can enable your characters, is by placing challenges in front of them or things that they can interact with and engage with.
Yeah, but I think one other thing is, right, you enable them to go along with their plan. Their plan is working as intended for 60% of the way. Then a challenge arises. You challenge your players in the enabling stage. You enabled your players to do something amazing, their amazing thing that they wanted to do. But now there comes a challenge along the way. If they best the challenge, basically the enabling gets doubled.
Yeah.
They get an extra success on top of their already enabled plan. If it fails, the enabled thing still works. Still 60% of the plan worked. But now you have to improvise a bit. Another point of, like you just said, where I can enable them. You have to improvise. How do you improvise? Okay, that sounds good. Let's go with it. Let's go. Once again, enabled. A new challenge comes along. A new challenge. Once again, a point of, do you succeed? Boy, that's amazing. It creates an even bigger amount of excitement, engagement, whatever you want to call the inherent potential of a scene. Basically, in my opinion, or it diverts the same potential into a different direction when you fail.
Yeah.
The scene is still high stakes, but you can either turn those stakes basically around in your favor by succeeding at the challenge your GM places in front of you, or it turns against you when you fail. And both points are once again points where you can then again be enabled another time.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing by directing if something fails, rather than just completely shutting the whole thing down. It all comes back to just don't have a single point of failure.
Oh, yeah.
Because one part of a plan can fail. And that's not you not enabling your players. Because the plan itself, up to this point, worked perfectly. Worked, you enabled them, everything's fine. But then something goes wrong. But then not everything else that comes after that goes to shit. And I mean, it does, but not directly. Not the whole venture that they set out to do goes to shit. But only this little part. Now they have to think on their feet how to get back on track. This thing alone, not having a single point of failure, enables enables your players to do more shit and more weird, fun stuff just because, if something fails, we can still make it work.
Yeah, and we have to make it work. That's the point, right? The players are then in the mindset of, shit, something went wrong. We have to make it work, or else our cover is blown and we get arrested or whatever, right? They are invested in that moment. Fuck, our plan was great, but there was one small point of failure. It failed. Now we have to improvise. Now we have to change so we can get back on track, or so that we can align the tracks to our new ideas. We have a plan B. Let's switch to plan B. Shit, plan A didn't work. Plan B is this. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like who isn't excited when they imagine that in their head being at the table as a GM or a player?
Yeah,
I really want to know the people that aren't excited about this. Because I would like to ask them how this works for them. But I want to get back to a little bit more of a practical advice, because we talked a little bit about the inherent ambiguous potential failing, blah, 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 blah. How can you as a GM actually practically challenge your players? What ways are there? What interesting ways can you think about challenging your players? I mean, people are listening to this and they might be thinking, okay, I understand what they are saying, that I should be challenging my players, but how do I do it? And that's the question.
Yeah, me being me again, it depends on the situation that you have at hand.
Yeah, obviously, but make it practical advice.
The most simple thing that I can think of is just literally placing a roadblock on the road that your players are traveling along.
Yeah.
Or the book that they were searching for or that they were tasked to find is not where it was supposed to. And now they have to find the book again.
Yeah.
Or they have to assassinate this local warlord. Now they have to do that.
Yeah.
Have to find a way how to get to close enough to him to get him killed.
100% exactly this. It's about the objective that they currently have.
Exactly.
Think to yourself, what objective do they have? And then think of a challenge. Whatever challenge you want. Be it combat, be it a skill challenge, be it a social interaction, be it whatever else. And place it in the way that they cannot achieve that objective without engaging with this thing. For example, the players are supposed to infiltrate the closed off parts of the library. Very simple quest, right? Yeah. Everyone has heard of sealed off libraries, and now the players are supposed to infiltrate one. Sounds fun. And they're supposed to get an ancient tome from there for one of their wizard friends. Okay, sounds easy enough. They break in without a problem. Now, inside this library, there are roaming golems. They avoid them. Good. And now you want to challenge your players in a new way. They avoided the combat with the golems, or they killed the golems, and you want to challenge them a bit. Doesn't mean that you should always obviously only think about, it was too easy to get to here. Now I should challenge them really. But if you think that it would be fun to place another different challenge in here, why not make the book that they are currently searching is currently placed in the hands of one of the librarians?
Sure.
That is
fun.
Interesting challenge.
Yeah.
You don't know at all about anything other than this. How do your players engage?
Yeah, and I think this shines a light on the players and the player characters, how they play out those characters, what they wanted to do. Because in this situation, there are a multitude of different ways how you can get that book back. But how does your group want to play this?
But this is the
interesting part.
This is exactly how challenging and enabling works together. You challenge them with, the book isn't easy to get. It's in the hands of one of the librarians, you see. What do? And then you give your players this point of interaction. There's a librarian reading your book right now. What do? The rogue player might be going, or the sneaky player goes, I will just sneak up, knock him out, and get the book. Easy peasy. And then one of the others goes, but wait, that's the problem. Because then they know something was stolen, and we don't want them to know that something was stolen, so they're searching for it. Okay, how do we get the book then? I don't know, maybe we can wait. Or maybe we pose as librarians wanting the same book and convince him that the book should belong to us.
Or place a decoy. Or
place a decoy. Or, I don't know, some kind of distraction, and then we just switch the books with something different, or with something that is akin to it, as that looks basically just like the book, and we just switch a few pages around or something. I don't know, but the players can have ideas. Maybe I use magic as an illusion or something. There's a lot of different ideas. And whatever way your players go, pull with the punch that they are throwing at you, because it's gonna be fun. You've placed a very ambiguous, non-descriptive, simple challenge in front of them, basically. There's a librarian reading the book you want. You can't just walk up to him and say, I want the book. Oh, well, you could, if that's what your character would do. There's no indication for what's the right way to engage with this.
Yeah.
And that way you enable your players, because you don't know the right answer. You shouldn't. Your players are the ones supposed to find the best answer for them. And you give them the chance this way.
Yeah, and I think these are the best challenges there are that have no clear-cut way on how they work, because they have a multitude of different ways they can go. And therefore, you can use the same challenge in multiple groups and it will never play out the same way, because you have different characters. Even if it's the same group of people that play characters, they play different characters. You can use the same fucking challenge because they play different characters and will interact differently with it. And the less clear-cut the solution to a challenge is, the more you enable your players with that challenge. In my opinion, you don't force them in a certain direction. You leave it pretty open. You just say, there is a problem. How the fuck do you want to solve it? Go ahead, hit me. I'm good with everything, basically.
Yeah. But I think that's the most practical advice I can give you as a GM for being a better GM today. Don't write challenges where you know the answer. Because if you know the answer to the challenge, right, for a riddle, you can know the answer. You can also know the stats for a combat encounter, obviously. And that's kind of giving some answers. But if you place a very ambiguous roadblock in the way to the objective your players want to achieve, you just give them the ability to be challenged and enabled at the same time, which is the thing that we want most. We want to have a challenging, engaging experience that allows us to do what we want to do, because that's the most fun. And the way to get to that point, the way to create these roadblocks is simple. You don't think about much. You think about the objective the players currently have, as clear as you can make it for yourself. Then you think about a roadblock that cannot be completely missed. I'm not gonna say overcome, because overcoming is what you want. But, right, for example, you don't want to, when the players want your book or want the book from the library, you don't want to place a roadblock like a bandit encounter outside the library. You don't want to place some kind of, I don't know, rebellious teenagers outside the library doors wanting to beat everyone to a pulp who comes in, because that can be very easily missed when the players want to enter through the backside window. It's a very easily missable challenge. Doesn't matter. But if you know the objective, find a challenge or find something that says this challenge cannot be just missed, that it has to be engaged with, either overcome, destroyed, I don't know, displaced, whatever you want to call it. And then think about the location you're in, where the goal takes place. If the goal takes place in a library, well, a librarian is the perfect challenge. And that's all you need. Make an unmissable challenge for your players, place it right in front of the objective, and then don't say anything about it.
I would go even a bit further, with a small bit further, is think about the campaign themes that you have going on and will have be going on in this in future campaign arcs. So you can either use the campaign themes that you have going on in this arc to enforce them, or hint at future campaign themes that will be going on through the different challenges. But obviously, that's just some added bonus. Nothing you need.
No. You need this. Think about the overarching themes. Think about the play styles of your players, obviously, right? Because if you place a very weenie librarian that can be knocked out unconscious in one hit by everyone, even in a front-out fight with the librarian, and the players want to always fight everything, then maybe this isn't really a challenge. But that's still the thing. Then the golems that roam these libraries could be the challenge.
Exactly.
The players want to get one of the books, but one of the golems is standing right in front of that bookshelf that the book is in. All of that stuff, right? Find the objective, make an unmissable challenge that fits the core vibe of the scene and the campaign themes and the play styles of your players, so that you at least have some idea for how they might approach it, so that it works most of the time. But make the challenge ambiguous. Don't have a right answer prepared all the time, because sometimes when you have a right answer prepared as a game master, you're way too set on solving it in this certain way, and that's not good, because your players do not think like you.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have anything else regarding that.
I am basically finished, I think. Yeah.
All right. So thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We'll hear you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DoubleDM. It appears you liked this one. What we had to say and our advice helped you. Why not show us how we helped you in a rating, or even write a review detailing us how we helped? You can do this on the platform that you are listening on right now. It's just a few clicks, doesn't take long, and helps us out. It gets us out there and our advice into more ears of more people. Thanks again for listening and joining us on this amazing journey. Have a great day, and hear you on the next one. Bye-bye.